Hello and welcome to Driver's Therapy. On today's segment, we are going to be talking about something that might not seem very driver related, but I promise it is. I officially passed the FAA's Part 107 Drone Certification exam today, so yes! And I got a 92%, so like I passed. You have to get a 70. So I did it, and I'm very proud. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, kind of the structure of how to get there, how I studied, the main topics you're going to hit, and then how to submit for your certification after you pass. So let's go ahead and talk about why we even bothered to do this. Okay, if you have a drone and you just fly it for fun, you can fly it. You still have to, know some rules and don't do anything stupid, but you're allowed to fly it. If you want to do anything commercial with it, anything at all where you get paid or get some sort of even non-monetary compensation, you have to, according to the FAA's rules, get yourself a 107 certification. So that includes a test, that includes some other stuff, etc., etc. There's big fines if you don't. So for us here at Driver's Therapy, we are using our drone to capture footage for monetization here on YouTube. So we figured we'd better go ahead and get that certification taken care of. So today, first couple things I want to go over with you guys is the process. So the FAA lays it out on their website. It's a little confusing, there's a lot going on, but if you really take the time and go literally step by step, it makes sense. So the first thing they ask you to do is go to IACRA, which is their Integrated Airman Tracking website. You go there, you make a profile. You get yourself an FTN, which is an FAA tracking number. Now you're like, why do I need this so soon? It's because you can't register for the test unless you have that FTN. So, make sure you register for it before you register for the test. But if you want to go ahead and register for the test early and see when you're going to take it, give yourself a nice solid deadline, you can do that. And I kind of recommend that. Here where we live, there are only 2 testing centers that offer this test, and they both have very limited options. All right, my next topic here is studying. So to study, I basically used the resources that the FAA provides, and I will link those down below. And I also use little bits and other pieces of things. So first, I used the FAA's 2016 study guide for remote pilots. That tells you pretty much everything, and I will talk about the topics that are in that here in the next part. Also know the Part 107 rules. Definitely know those. 1, you need them to pass the test, and 2, those are the rules you actually need to abide by when you fly your drone commercially. You don't want to break those and get in trouble with law enforcement and get fines. So know them. The next part is the Airman Testing Supplement. So it's this big old book, and it's available digitally, which is what I use to look at, but it's the exact same book they give you at the testing center. So when you're going through the test, there will be things that say, refer to figure 25 and look at section 2. What's the CTAF for that airport? So you flip through the book, you find it, you look at it, you read it, you find your answer, you're good to go. So having some familiarity with that book is really good. There's a lot of stuff in there that has to do with instrument-rated flights and all sorts of other things that for drones we don't really care about, but we definitely need to know how to read those charts, which I will come back to in a bit. And of course, YouTube. Definitely there's some good resources out there. I'm sure there are a ton. The big one that everyone will mention, so I'm going to do it too, is Tony Northrup's. And he just literally goes through essentially the study guide from 2016 and breaks everything down bit by bit. It's pretty much the same thing as going through the study guide from 2016. I did both, and for me, I'm better with reading, so I was fine with that, but it didn't hurt to kind of hear it again too. And there are other people as well, don't worry, but that's the big one. And then practice tests. There are several sources. A lot of them are kind of the same. Repetitive questions, but if nothing else, it's practice. And again, I'll link those down below. And then at the last minute, like those last couple days, I went ahead and got on Quizlet, which is one of the many, practice flashcard types of studying apps, and just went and searched, FAA Part 107 or Part 107 or Part 107 weather, and found that people had made some cool study sets that I just borrowed and went through the flashcards and kind of got some more things stuck in my head, like the different acronyms for weather and METARs and TAFs. So that worked for me. So that is my study set. I kind of started with the guide and the rules and then branched out from there, did some practice tests, went back and kind of researched some stuff I needed more information on, listened to Tony's thing just to kind of make sure it was all in there, went to the Quizlets, and that was really about it. So, yeah. All right, next, topics. Topics that will be on the test. I'm going to start with the new 2021 rules. So in April of 2021, the FAA updated several things, and among those there are now categories of drones, and they break it down into Category 1, Category 2, Category 3, and Category 4. Category 1 is really tiny and has propeller protectors, kind of like that. Category 2, I don't remember the exact details, but it can only potentially hit you with 11 foot-pounds of impact or something like that. Category 3, blah, blah, blah. Category 4 is basically a UPS, USPS, Amazon, that kind of thing. And the video I really liked for this one was Tim McKay's. Again, I'll link it down below. He really broke it down nicely. I would say make sure you go read it yourself though, especially know like the exceptions to some stuff, so that you are prepared for those exam questions. Another thing is remote IDs. So in 2023, it's going to be mandatory that all of our drones have remote IDs on them, whether that's included by the manufacturer or attached as an aftermarket piece. That's going to be the norm. So right now, not necessary, but they are testing on those questions already. So make sure you understand those as well. Again, Tim McKay goes over those. Flying over people. You used to have a very specific waiver for this. Now there are some looser regulations depending on what category of drone you have, what kind of the group of people is like, et cetera, know those. And at night. So again, that used to be something where you had to have a waiver. Now there's some other pieces of information to that, including having lights that are visible for 3 nautical miles and other details. General topics. These are the topics that are in that 2016 guide. Regulations and waivers. Again, know all those regulations. Know how high you're allowed to fly, 400 feet above ground level. Know how close you're allowed to be to clouds, 500 feet under, 2,000 feet away horizontally. Know whether or not you're allowed to fly at night, or if you're flying at night, what you need to do to be legal. Knowing all sorts of different things. So definitely understand those regulations. Again, not just for the test. Yes, you need to know that to pass, but also for your own actual use in life so you avoid getting yourself in trouble. Waivers. There are still several things that have to be waivered. You don't really need to know the exact details of that process from what I can tell, but definitely know that there is a process to get certain things waivered and what those things might be. So flying over populated areas from a vehicle is definitely one of those. All right, big one here, airspace and charts. I probably had 15 questions or so about charts where I had to like go to figure 25, go to figure 52, go to figure 17, et cetera, et cetera. And frankly, I thought they were pretty cool. They're pretty easy. They even give you a legend in the front of that book that they hand you at the testing center. So a lot of it, if you don't quite remember the detail, you can go back and find out. Not everything is in there though. There was definitely two questions where I hadn't run across it and it wasn't in my book and I just kind of had to guess. So for the airspace, there are basically 5 types of airspace. Class A, way up here, really high, 18,000 feet and higher. Class B, everyone says it, it's true, it's an inverted wedding cake, gets smaller and smaller circles as it goes down. And at the top it's really wide, narrower, narrower as it comes into that airport space because those planes are going up and out. Class C is a little bit smaller than that, usually only 2 stacks. Class D is smaller. E is all of the empty space around in between. And then G is technically the space where we can fly as we want to, as long as we follow all the other rules and regulations that you read about in Part 107. So with that, know those. Know which ones are which. Know which heights they start and end at. That's listed and described in that 2016 handbook. You definitely want to know that. There will be questions that ask you, you're flying to visit this tower, and when there's towers, you're technically allowed to fly 400 feet higher than their top and 400 feet around them. But if you add that into however high you already are on your sea level, compared to your ground level, you might be getting into someone's airspace. And you can't do that unless you have specific permission to be in that airspace. So make sure you understand those, where they are, how they impact your flying, because again, real world situations, but also for the test, I had a few of those, so pay attention to that. And then also for the charts, tons of information on those charts. You've got the airspace markings, so they're blue, they're magenta, they're dashed, they're shaded. Again, that stuff is pretty well listed in the legend, but then you've also got, if it's magenta, that's a different thing than if it's blue. If it's blue, that's usually that it's towered. If it's magenta, it's not, unless it's military, and then it's the opposite. There's different types of zones. There's restricted zones, and there's prohibited zones, there's warning zones, all these different types of things that you should know what that means to you as someone with something that flies. Other things on charts, there's VFR lines for VFR pilots, kind of highways for them that they can follow certain headings and get where they're going and know that they're good to go. There are military training routes too. Those have certain types of numbers. Know those. And just know them. Definitely go through the VFR charts guides, understand them. You don't have to memorize everything, but definitely have a good grasp of what it is. Okay. Moving on, weather and weather reports. Those are another big set of pieces of information. I'd say weather showed up more on my test than reports did, but they're kind of hand in hand, right? So weather, the big things you want to know there are what is high density altitude and low density altitude. High density altitude is basically high altitude. If you just take out the density, that's what it means. So high altitude, you usually have less pressure, you have thinner air, usually different temperature. All of those things have an impact on how much purchase the propellers can get in the air. How dense is the air? The less dense it is, the less that vehicle can do. So just understanding how that changes your vehicle's operations is really important, and again, also important for the test. Understanding how humidity impacts things, understanding the different types of clouds and how they form. And it's not every cloud, but just kind of the basic idea of, cumulonimbus clouds, kind of a big deal. Thunderstorms, not good, not fun. Okay, stay away. So knowing that, and just paying attention to all those things like humidity and different cloud ceilings and all of that for what impact it might have. How cold fronts come across, how there's weather inversions as far as it's colder down instead of up, which is opposite of what you'd normally think. That's more likely to cause humidity and dew and that kind of thing down below, which if it's cold, can turn into ice, and that's not good for your flying either. Whew, right? Okay, so know all of those things. And then the reports. I thought these were kind of fun, actually. It takes a second to kind of get your head wrapped around it at speed, but there are METARs and TAFs. So METARs are like, here's the weather report at this time from this airport. You can look them up online for the airport near you and just see what's happening. It'll tell you the time, it'll tell you the current conditions, it'll tell you, if there's any particular gusts of wind, it'll tell you if there's any thunderstorms in the area or lightning in the area, and that's really cool. Now with that, beneath that, there's often the TAF. That's the Terminal Aerodrome Forecast. It's bigger, it's a big chunk. So it starts off and says, hey, I'm valid from this time to this time, here's the time I was issued, here's kind of the general span of things. It's gonna be like this, it's gonna be like this, and then they switch it to the next line where it says from 0200. So at 2 o'clock, this is what the weather's gonna be like, 2 a.m. specifically. And then they'll tell you it's gonna be, 3/8 cloud cover, with some scattered showers and 3 knots of wind. Cool. The next line will say, from 8 a.m. So that first line was valid from 2 a.m. until 8 a.m. The next one starts at 8 a.m. They give you more information. So just knowing how to read those, the probabilities, the different types of rain, all of that, that's something that, again, is really good to use, but it's also definitely going to show up on your test. So just get comfortable with those. Again, you don't have to memorize, but definitely know kind of what those things are. All right, another thing that is on there is CRM, which is Crew Resource Management. Now, contrary to the word crew, it actually means everything that you're involved with. Not just your crew, also your plane, also the elements, everything that's happening, everything that you're involved with, that's part of your crew resource management. And so they want you to really just think about how all of those pieces interplay and interact, read up on it. They'll tell you basically, if it comes to safety, that's the thing you want, right? Their whole point with literally all of this is to be safe. So crew resource management is one of those that can pretty much always default to whatever the safest concept is. That's what you should be doing. And there's some good practice questions on that on the practice test too. All right, radios, airport communication, and how planes interact with airports. We don't get to do that, but we have to understand it. So radios, I didn't have any questions that had to do with the phonetic alphabet, but it doesn't hurt to know it. And that's partly because we are expected to, if we are in range of an airport, be listening to their communications, whether that's a tower, whether that's a CTAF, whatever it is that is available from the airport, we're supposed to know what's going on so that if we hear something that might impact us, we can avoid it. We're supposed to be the ones avoiding those problems. We give way to anything, even a hot air balloon. We lose. We back off. We take our time. We try it again. All right, physiological issues. Big thing. Do not drink and fly. FAA does not approve at all, and it's just a dumb idea. So the rule with them is from your last drink to when you pick up the controls, it has to have been at least 8 hours. That's just hard and fast. Don't break it. Another hard and fast rule is that your blood alcohol may not be any higher than 0.04. So it might be past those 8 hours, but if you had a really big party the night before and you're still over that 0.04, you still don't pick up the controllers. Okay, so it's just a huge safety thing. We all know what alcohol does. It slows you down, it makes you funky. You're not gonna fly as well as you could. So that's a huge one for them. They also have some checklists, which are pretty nifty. I know some people have gotten some questions on their tests about it. I didn't, but they have the I'm Safe, which is your pilot checklist. Think about the things that could be affecting you as a pilot. You're basically checking yourself because it's not like you have a huge crew to, check in with. It's usually you or maybe you and one other person. So I'm Safe. It's any illnesses, any medication, any stresses, alcohol, fatigue, or any emotional distress. Are any of these things impacting you right now in such a way that it's going to reduce your capacity to fly safely? So that's one to consider. There's another one that's PAVE, which is a little outside of yourself, but thinking about the plane, about the pilot, the aircraft, the environment, and then any other external factors. Are there pressures from other people? Are there things going on, with the weather? What other things do you need to consider to make sure that your checklist is good to go? So those are just some things to keep track of, and again, they're actually kind of useful. All right, that brings us to ADM, which is Aeronautical Decision Making. Now that's when you take all the stuff we've been talking about and put it into your risk management process. So aeronautical decision making, they say, basically takes you from considering, what are the factors here, what are the risks, how can I maybe mitigate them, and then what am I actually going to do? Let's implement it. So really working through all of that thought process, analyzing what you've got to handle, analyzing how you can handle it or whether you can't. What are you going to do in each of those situations? So knowing what the FAA says is good and what is bad, basically it follows everything else you're studying. If you're tired because you drove 25 hours that day, you shouldn't fly. If someone's making you do something really fast, you shouldn't fly. You've got to do what you've got to do to be safe. That's your responsibility as the remote pilot in control. That does show up a lot. Essentially, if it says, who's the one who's in charge of this? Who's the one who should make the final decision on this? It's always the remote pilot in control. So you're in charge if you have the certification. Everybody else has to defer to whatever you're saying because you're the one who's got their license and fines and that kind of thing on the line. So there you go. And then maintenance is something else they touch on. It's kind of pretty well known that for most of our drones, like from DJI and that kind of thing, don't really have a maintenance log for us as the users. So if there were one, we should follow it, right? But the FAA says if there isn't one, you as the remote pilot in control needs to establish one. So you can just keep a logbook that says, every Sunday I check that the propellers are clean and don't have nicks, and I do this and I do this, and every time before I fly I do 1, 2, 3, sign it off. Just having something to show that you are aware and consistent and being safe as you can. All right, those are the topics. Go read them. Go watch other people's YouTube videos who tell you a lot more detail, but that's what I really came across as strong points and what I really saw kind of show up on the test. So know those things. And then finally, you go to take the test. It's not that bad. It's only 60 questions. Each question has 3 answer choices. As a lot of people have said, a lot of times one of those answer choices is just wrong. But A couple of them weren't, so a couple of them were a little tricky, but it's by no means the hardest test I've taken. I've taken a lot of exams and certifications and that kind of thing. Just knowing the material was the hardest part, and then it wasn't so bad after that. So you take the test, you pass, you come home, excitement, and then you go and you apply for your certificate. So I went upstairs, I logged in, back into IACRA, and I told it, hey, I passed. It linked my test in, took my information, and said it's going to be at least 7 days. We've got to run a TSA background check on you. We'll send you your temporary certificate in an email, and then we'll send you your for real one in 4 to 6 weeks. So I am looking out for that. I'm excited to get that, and it'll be fantastic. And of course, make sure you register your drone. That has its own fines and fees if you don't do it. Thank you all for watching. Please reach out if you have any questions. We're here, we're excited, and we'll be bringing you more drone footage soon. Thanks. Have a great day.